So silos, fun conversation, and it's killing a ton of things for both sides of the equation, sales and onboarding. And I always will call out my brethren in sales. Um, it's frequently masked by the word ghosting, um, and saying that we're just getting ghosted. Well, you're getting ghosted for other reasons. It's not that people don't know how to communicate and collaborate. And so we're going to kind of talk about that and why deals go to never, never land, and how silos are literally everywhere. And I don't know if you're ready for this kind of feedback since our relationship is just starting here, but you have silos yourself. And so this isn't just the customer's problem. Your company is at least 50% of the problem. And in some cases, it is more on you than them. And so we're going to kind of explore a lot of this today. So enjoy that feedback as your webinar, right? You're the problem. I don't mean it in a negative way, right? I'm just saying, how do we solve it, right? Let's just own it and figure it out. And so we're going to kind of go through a couple of reasons why, more importantly, how to solve these problems. And I know we have a lot of people who, come to a lot of our webinars. This one we're north of 80, frequently in the 200s, and a lot of them are educational. All of you are from different backgrounds and different kind of company types. So I always offer, if something I say here doesn't align exactly with you, just reach out. And I always do a free just consultation and just help kind of align things. Did 2 of those today alone. So yeah, look forward to having some fun here. And really just take the information and try to, I always say, apply it today. Like there's stuff you can do right now. Yeah, you do what you do. I hope you do more of it. So let's get into it. So, okay, the first, environment of complexity, right? So why are there silos? Well, there are silos now because job specifications, corporations, really any size company, even now, it's more of a buyer group mentality. So that's on the sales side. And then of course, silos equally happen on the onboarding. I'm going to kind of bounce in between on both here. There is obviously a massive amount of commonality between the two, right? There just are. But I will kind of walk through maybe some specific use cases on other ones. But everything is just more complex now, especially I will put out there, if the transaction is more than 10 grand, you're going to get into a lot more buyer group type of ecosystem. But that doesn't mean there aren't tons of buyer groups for literally 100 freaking bucks, right? And so it's everywhere, but it does typically, the number of people, like we have some deals like we sell into hospitals or other regulated industries. It's not unheard of, if it's a meaningful group, to have 30 to 50 people on the buying side, and on the implementation side, sometimes even more, because you're having to go through all the legal to IT compliance, multiple divisions, right? Just buy-ins, all sorts of stuff. So that the number of people is pretty substantial, and this can greatly affect kind of everything around the transaction itself, obviously leading to ghosting. But there's just silos everywhere. And so in a consensus sell and a consensus onboarding, you have to realize that that's just inevitable, and that managing via basically, an Excel spreadsheet or just email is probably not going to get you to where you want to be. So we're going to focus on these silos. Where do they come from? How does it affect the transactions? And it's the proliferation of it is astronomical. It's not going away. You can't hide from it. It's just going to get worse and worse. So I typically almost show this slide. I'm sure if I was audited for the last 56 webinars, this is probably in there. I don't know if I mentioned at the beginning, but I'll just start. One of the leaders of Proteus and Gate. I've been with the firm 24 years, massive amount of experience in this space and seeing everything. And so I like to share these as kind of educational. And then obviously we do have a world-class platform against this. Clearly, I wouldn't waste the knowledge I've learned. But ultimately, I'm here to kind of share. So the environment in B2B, 100% this. If you're on this call and you're B2C, probably not the right webinar for you unless you're selling jets, high-end equipment, other things which we do help in B2C. high dollar amount kind of transactions. We do help there. So the other piece of siloing is most times in a complex sale and in an onboarding, you're needing to get a crap ton of information sharing and collaboration on things. So it's not only just the communication and aligning those horses, it's also you start to need things from these people also in order to create the velocity and momentum for that sale. If you're doing like proof of concepts, trials, other things of that nature on the sales side, and then clearly anybody here with the onboarding hat or kind of deployment implementation side, you typically need a lot of stuff, and those can be all over the organization, and a lot of times those are getting held up because, not in a mean way, you're just one priority of 75 priorities, right? And that's just been dropped on their plate last week. And so how do you elevate the delegation and the collaboration around that to get your stuff back to you so you continue to have a successful either A, sale, or B, onboarding, right? So you got a double layer kind of problem here, which is the silo effect. Is the organizations want to have more people involved on both sides, sales and onboarding, and then there has to be a ton of communication and collaboration. Then you start to need stuff from them, and it just starts to metastasize into a pretty large problem, right? Just in general, really challenging for you guys, no matter what side of the coin you're on. And if you're a super complex sale, probably you and onboarding are actually together almost the entire time during this too, because it's that important of an account and opportunity. So let's continue on. Just I like to frame a lot of the time so the mindset is right. It's you just want to be kind of thinking in a certain direction, because then we can be candid with each other as to what really happens at this level. So I put this one up. There's two sides of the coin. I already talked about it a little bit. A lot of the stuff on the right hand side is kind of in the B2B onboarding, but they really align everywhere. And I always, you probably have heard me say, we're big on collaborative plans. We're big on lots of ways of bringing people together and navigating this journey together truly as partners and setting the right expectations. But a lot of the times in the sales process and also in the onboarding process, just a crap ton of unknown. And I frequently will say in presentations and stuff, like, the customer doesn't know what they don't know, whether that's in sales or whether it's in onboarding. But so many times people kind of come to the table in the sales process or the onboarding process with like this presumption that the other side knows everything. And so there's a tremendous amount of, one would dare say, over communication that needs to be done in expectation management, but also they don't know. So you have to really guide them to success. And it's always two sides. You're equally to blame. It's like a marriage, right? Like, come on. Like it's a team. Let's figure this out together. Let's open communicate. Let's try to drive this to success. So you'll hear me talk about that quite a bit, because it's true. A lot of our clients had troubles internally herding the cats, and then they're selling stuff that has the same exact problem just on the other side of the equation. So how do you break down those silos on both sides and get the mission, the objective achieved, which is great for both sides of the equation, a common vision, a common goal for success. All right. So you might be like, Joe, enough already. You said that, but it's very important. So what do silos look like? You might be on this call and saying, you know what, we don't have any silos. I just wanted to learn what everybody else is struggling with because you're not struggling with it. So let me help you kind of identify where you might be having some struggles overall. So again, on the sales side, it's going to be a lot of disjointed. Is it start, stop? A lot of email communication, just lots of not consistency in that engagement, and whether this is sales or in the onboarding side, right? Is the customer getting poor information? Like, is everything correct? Does everybody know what's going on? Whether that's in the sales process, especially if you're doing a trial or a pilot or anything like that, can be really challenging, right? And so you have to kind of look at your process, whether you're sales or onboarding here. And is it start, stop? Is it miscommunication? Is it we're waiting on somebody to get us something? Do we really have to wait for that in order to continue this process, right? So the siloing can multiply and really drag things into very bad situations. Um, Conflicting goals, right? Sometimes you'll have a sales org that wants to push the deal through to get that revenue for quarter three. But the reality is maybe onboarding hasn't really analyzed the client to really properly build that right plan for the contract or other things. So it's harmonizing everybody for the common goal, which is getting the client to be successful, whether it's sales or on the other side. And then typically what we encourage is there are personas. I think everybody kind of knows personas. You might also refer to them as roles, ROLES, um, and roles. And so if you haven't done this yet, when you're trying to attack the problem of silos, we frequently start with just list out on a piece of paper in front of you how many different roles or persona types in your org are involved in whether it's the sale and the onboarding. If you're going to have fun, do it for both and start to figure out who all those people are down to every detail. Lawyers have to come in maybe on the contract, right? Compliance might have to come in on this. Start to really list out who your roles and personas are on these things, because to break your own internal silos equips you with a lot of the information that you need more than likely to break down your client silos, right? A lot of the same roles are going to be on side there. I don't know everybody's companies, everybody's different. So I'm not, obviously there's compliance, IT, lawyers, billing, whatever. Obviously, normal stakeholders, 5 to 7 stakeholders, etc. But just lay it out, just write it down of who all those people are, and think about: do you have a communication plan to those types? Do you have the right expectations set internally, whether it's mutual plans or other things to help organize this stuff? And then reversely on the client side, because everybody has to be in alignment for the win, right? And then based on that, of course, you can start to fill gaps with technology, and other elements around that. You don't want to be looking at technology unless you know your problems and where those lie. Even though I'm a technology provider and we sell an awesome solution for this, the value will be much higher as you internally socialize this concept when you really start to understand how big the problem might be, right? So how to identify those silos: start, stop. In onboarding, it's going to be TTV, your measurement of time to value. Like, is that elongating? Is it getting worse over time? All of these things kind of help you start to figure out, okay, what does my battle plan have to look like? So, why are silos so important to Rev? It kind of feels by design we're slowing down, but you're actually speeding up. And like, that's what I was just getting at. Like, figuring out the battle plan instead of trudging and stiff arming and pushing, it can be a lot easier if you step back and just kind of look at: why is this important? How do we communicate that with the stakeholders, not only on your own side, but also obviously on the client side? And those are expectation management during onboarding. Yeah, as you know, we're very big on mutual plans and kind of collaborative growth. And so in onboarding, we frequently do a ton of like pre-mortems. Why would this fail with the client, right? So you're setting the expectations. And in that pre-mortem, you're telling them, in the typical client, we need to work with these 7 to 10 people internally on your side. Do you guys feel comfortable you have those people? Are those people equipped and ready to be able to solve what our needs are and to keep this on velocity and keeping it on track? And then trying to predict failure at that point. That simple little conversation, what I just said to you guys, would have shaved probably 100 days off of this call for the collective group, if not more. Just setting the right expectation, knowing the people who have to be involved, and setting the clear expectation of what we expect from them right at the beginning, instead of dripping it out over time, immediately can impact that silo, finding the right person, getting the right thing done at the right time. So why is this important? Clearly, it all goes back to the dollar signs, right? No sales, things just die during the sales process because you're not penetrating and you're not giving your internal champ enough of the tools. Again, for some of you who are in onboarding here, there's sales, then sales obviously goes out to a client to try to get them as a client. There's typically one person or two that are called internal champs, and those internal champs are responsible for breaking down all of the silos within their company. So in order to break down the silos within their company during the sales process, you have to equip them with the right information and the right angles to get that buy-in from all the internal stakeholders on that silo side of the client. This is, again, where deals go to die. This is where it will be blamed on ghosting. They're not getting back to me, right? All of the typical sales excuses, a lot of them are derivatives of siloing, proper presentation to the right stakeholders, et cetera, et cetera. So from the sales people on it, love your feedback. Obviously, would love to obviously brainstorm. On the CS side, same exact thing, or onboarding, depending where you play. It's going to be a horrible experience for the client. You're 25% of churn if you're a SaaS player here. About 20 to 30% of churn derives during dissatisfaction during the onboarding process. So if the siloing effect is dragging out your deployment and slowing things down, or you're not recognizing the value you desired, it can greatly impact churn and obviously really miss the expectations and opportunities, because many of you in your organizations need to sell the client twice to really be making money. And that's because, as we all know, clients are buying in phases or modules, or a little bit now, more later, I promise you. And so all of it is high expectation that you better deliver this. So the siloing effect can really dampen short-term rev and long-term rev, right? I think everybody is trending along on this. I appreciate some of the comments. So let's continue on, right? So that's the impact. So some strategies to break down, and again, all of you are in different, ecosystems or scenarios. Sorry, dry throat. Allergies. I don't know. Many of you guys get them. It's like can't run amok. But so strategies to break down silos. Obviously, I kind of alluded to one of them earlier that I did not include here. It's at the bottom a little bit, but it's both basically starting at the beginning, is understanding the roles and the personas involved, not only on your side, but then also on the client side. And so during the sales process, so there's sales personas, and then there's onboarding personas there, really looking at all the people. And then after you understand those people, you gotta kind of have to look at how do you do the things across the board here, which is unifying that information, because a lot of times silos are generated because of miscommunication and not access to the right information. Many of you will chuckle here. That's the horrible handoffs that you're familiar with, whether you're sales or onboarding. That's where the horrible handoffs come from. Again, that's siloing, right? Et cetera, like that. Oh, I will say real quick, I know we're approaching the half hour. I forgot to mention, some of you were asking. Yes, we always share out the video, the PowerPoint, everything. You'll get it in your inbox later today, and it will be on the website later today also. Thank you for the question. I forgot to mention that at the beginning. But ultimately, back to the strategies, it's also figuring out how to foster that communication across your different teams. Again, persona based. How are you sharing all the data and information? So a little bit is cleaning up your house, obviously, around these things once you figure out ultimately, how to break down these. And the last but not least on this is, of course, I put assign ownership. Accountability is king. And so in these processes, whether it's the sales process or the onboarding process, it's obviously collaborating, breaking down those silos, but setting the right expectations and ownership of the individual roles that are going to be playing in that. And if not, we need to find those problems way earlier in the process. Obviously, sales and onboarding, typically they're a little bit different people. So you got to do a little bit of homework, but it's not a lot of homework. And then you just ask yourself, are we equipping that role for success? And if we're not, what information are they lacking? What collaboration needs to be going on with them to keep them up to date as to what's going on? And do we have a way to kind of have visibility to this? So there's obviously your CRM. And then, of course, a lot of people clearly use our tool to do all the communication, collaboration, and herding the cats through our secure workspaces. So that's obviously where we come into play, is how do you externalize this, obviously, during the sales or the onboarding process, right? So let's continue on. I think we're starting to build the building blocks. So the first resolution for you, you got to centralize everything. I don't care what tool you use to do this. Hopefully it's ours, but I just got to say, like, in 2025, many of you just bought lunch as you sat down to sit here, and through Grubhub you watched your order being made, getting into a little vehicle, and that little vehicle drove through all the traffic that you wouldn't want to deal with, and dropped off your lunch at your thing, and you saw it coming from around the corner. If a $12 meal you have that kind of visibility to, what do you think a B2B customer is expecting? A, during the sales process, and B, during the onboarding process. Help them out. Get things organized, get things centralized so that they can make effective decisions. On this call today, I don't know how many have just joined, but 80 something signed up. out of all 80, all of you have streaming. Every single one of you has streaming. Why? Because you want to have access to information on demand in a centralized place. And that's just imperative that for any of these things to be successful, complex selling with silos and stakeholders and handoffs and onboardings, you have to provide a conduit not only to break the silos on your side, but also on the customer side, right? Having it so it's easy for them to get you the information on time to successfully be onboarded and communicate and updates and tracking and having visibility where things are at. Just get it centralized. That alone will be a systemic benefit to your organization overall. All right. Just being very, very transparent. That's the first step in the process is doing that, because you can't do all the other things. You can't have visibility till you don't know what's going on. You don't know who's going in and doing the information. The people aren't accessing the right information in a timely manner. All of these things are only possible by creating a house first. You build the house and then you start buying the furniture. Don't buy the furniture first. Okay. So first, centralized environment. Next one for breaking down is going to be, you knew it was coming, any of you know, I'm an accountability theme. And so accountability, whether you want to call it a mutual plan, you want to call it a journey book, I don't care what you call it, but ultimately you have to provide a vision for success. What are the steps to that success, and what are the elements needed for success? And then those have to be owned by the individuals inside all of these silos, again, the personas and roles on your deal, right? So you can see there's building blocks here. I'm going to go a little bit backwards to then come forwards. So understanding the players first, understanding those players' expectations, and then how do you operationalize those things are through a mutual plan and delivery system to manage the basically velocity of the sale. And if it's in onboarding, it's hitting those clear milestones so that you can get the customers to time to value and deployed. This also is very mission critical in professional services types of ecosystems also, because you might be bringing resources in at different points in time during any of these processes, right? So high level, these are the critical things related to a mutual plan. You have a common shared goal. You can't tell me we're going to deploy them by July 20th. And then you ask the customer, are we going to launch by July 20th? They're like, we don't even know what we're doing. Like, what do you need from us? Right? Timelines, I'm making, that's a joke, obviously. But you're getting my point here is it has to be mutual and agreed upon and be visible to everybody in order to keep that velocity. And yes, you're going to have problems. You just want to Smokey the Bear, find those problems, see that smoke before it becomes a forest fire. And that's ultimately what it's all about. By having it centralized and being able to do that, that's how you can win on these things. Okay. So this is for sales, handoff, and onboardings to bust those silos. We're going to dig a little more into this because it's that important. So we're going to come full cycle again to role clarity and focus. Know who your players are. And there is always going to be some extensions to that, clearly. But typically in a common sales cycle for your clients, and or you might have differentiation between vertical types. So we have clients that when they're selling into hospitals, the roles are different clearly than when they're selling into a bank, right? So you might have bifurcation or a little bit adaptations based on the industry you're selling into. Many of you are probably multi-industry, so you have to take that for sure into consideration. But ultimately, the underlying themes and what you do with those roles stays pretty similar, right? It's marketed a little bit differently. You might have a couple of different things. Clearly, if any of you are in financial services, like if you call a credit union a bank or a bank a credit union, you can lose the deal almost in a minute of saying that wrong. Literally. I hope somebody on this call sells into banks and is laughing. Give me a thumbs up in the thing. But like, it's that critical of a mistake. So you do have to watch out that role clarity. But obviously what you're trying to do to attack all of these problems with the silos is to create that centralized environment, open up communication, open up expectation management, and doing this at the beginning so that you're clearing the roadway for anything downstream and not adding things later on linearly that could really slow down, whether it's the sales process and or the onboarding process. Okay. So silos, people, environment, centralized, collaborate, drive that. Okay. Critical. for anybody on this call, these are the mission critical silo breakers. If you're having problems getting the silo people, the personas and stakeholders involved, it depends on what you're doing. So we have seen very successfully executed. If you're a sales rep on this call or a leader of sales, you might complain like, my team is demoing our product 10 times to different stakeholders to try to get this thing over the line, right? And that's real. That happens all the time. What is never considered is, why is this person actually wanting to see our product? The reality is a lot of the individuals in the silo that start to come to play don't care about your service. They're actually managing risk for the organization. Let me say that again. The people involved and frequently in these silos don't care about your service. They're not even going to be a user of the service you have. What they are part of the buyer committee or the onboarding committee to manage catastrophic risk to the org, the people, the data, the environment, etc. So what happens is frequently they're all handled the same when they really don't care about your product. A lot of the times it's, how do you communicate around the risk that they're trying to understand, and you're communicating in a way that makes them feel comfortable. I hope that makes sense to everybody. The buyer group, the silo group, tons of the onboarding people are there not for the product. They're there to protect the house. So how do you communicate and relate with them and share them the information and the things they want to know to manage that risk? Yeah, that's deep, and I apologize for getting, but like, that's the reality. Like, that is truly the reality. 15 demos is not right. Okay. Mutual plans, attack them, hold everybody accountable, build that strategy, execute it, deliver. Next one, integrations and visibility. Maybe I jumped the shark on that one. Sorry. So a lot of the things too, the silo, thinking on your side now a little bit. The workspace, obviously, that we provide is centralizing everybody on the client side. Obviously, you also have access to that. But then there's also just, how do we streamline things on your end, because you want single point of entry, you want all the data to be harmonized. Obviously, Engage integrates with all the CRMs and Slack, Teams, email, like everything, to make it very, very straightforward voice of customer and centralized and scale. But you have to look at that on your side right now, depending on where your org is and where you're at in your journey map of your own internal collaboration. But it's just ensuring that everybody has the right visibility on progress, where are we at, red dot items, anything that is coming up, and that this is scalable, right? Many of you hopefully are selling more than one customer a year, right? You're also hopefully onboarding more than one customer a year. So it's about getting that centralized, as I've talked about, then having the visibility. Now that you have all this information, and it's very, very important, you want to make sure all your internal stakeholders on your side are seeing this information for progress. But then it also gives you, if you have a title here of director or higher, this equips you with the information to improve your own performance, meaning customer satisfaction during these journeys, whether it's sales or onboarding. It's also just changing and tweaking your processes to be better optimized. It's just continuous improvement to drive success. One of the things that has been very successful for our company is when people, subscribe to Engage, it's not just platform, it's also coaching, continuous coaching, because everything evolves over time. You're always launching new products or services, all sorts of things. We're always looking at how to optimize these things to really win on a global level and whatever it is. So it's a lot of coaching and also platform tweaks to really drive that success. But in order to do that, you have to have the visibility to the information to win, right? Like, just ultimately. So, you don't, I alluded to building a house. Well, you don't build a house and then later on figure out you want a basement. Like, you should figure out you want a basement before you build pour the foundation, right? So it's these kinds of things you have to know, and then you can make the adaptations to better improve breaking down these silos. You're not going to be able to break down all the silos all at once. And then frankly, offline, I'll say once you identify those silos, there's sometimes a misconception that the perception is maybe you're like, oh, I got to deal with all these people. And I don't mean deal in a negative term. You're like, it's a lot of work. It takes a lot of time. It's slowing things down. But sometimes when that conversation is framed as, hey, we're a team here, especially if it's internally, same thing with the customer, because they want to be successful. They bought your product or service because they have some red dot item or bleeding point that you're there to help with. That candid conversation of how do we attack this problem and do this so that both of us can be successful can change the tone. And what can I do to make it easier for you to help us win? So if it's security, great security. What information could I just ask the customer on day one and have that packaged up in a way that was consumable by you, that you could give me a thumbs up on this solution without having you to have 10 meetings and eat up a lot of your team's time? What could I do to make your team more successful and happier? They're willing to tell you that typically. And so you take that again back and then build your process, build your stuff around that. And all of a sudden, silo one has been cleared, or at least 90%, and they only need them for one meeting or one quick Zoom just to dot the I's and cross the T's. So it's a little bit strategic, like I keep saying, but then it's always continuous improvement around that. So when we hear silos, when we have new clients come to us, they're like, Joey, we got a lot of silos. Great, good. That's good that you have a lot of silos. You're growing, and the clients you're selling into have a lot of silos. That's understandable. That's good. So how do we architect a process and environment to help you knock those down at least by 80%, right? Like that's the reality. Okay. So the mutual dance, I've talked about it repeatedly. This is just a recap basically of that. What I'd like to say beyond what's on the screen here from an ROI perspective, once you're able to identify this silo blocking, what you're actually doing is optimizing your sales process clearly and your onboarding process. So the financial benefits are substantially bigger than just feeling better about the process and removing people from the equation. It also dramatically improves your operational efficiency internally. We see around 30% just straight up operational, meaning sales side and CS side. That's like one free rep for every four. Like that's pretty impressive, right? You also have much higher customer satisfaction because it doesn't feel like they're trudging through this onboarding with them or even the sales process, right? Because if you're giving the internal champ a way to do this very efficiently on their end, they're feeling really positive. Plus the other stakeholders, the ones who are judging your risk, they're like, these guys have their crap together here. Look at this. They're already pre-answering 90% of my questions that I would normally ask a new vendor coming on. This is impressive. They must have done this before. They must have listened to their customers before, and they understand what the needs of their customer are. That perception is very, very important during all of these processes here. Okay. So the wins are much more, much more. And I have all sorts of slides that could explain the proof is in the performance, but I'm just telling you them. Like that's what you're going to be seeing. So you're achieving multiple problems for you guys and then driving that home. So as I normally do, right on schedule, 35 minutes on kind of the why. For some of you, I'm going to share because some of you have asked through the site, like, can you just show something to, and I do this, I'm not demoing, everybody calm down. I'm not cheating you into a demo here. So I just want to show, because this kind of is a very simple use case of how our tool is used, but this is our product called, obviously, it's called Engage. This is our logo, but this is branded as your stuff. This is your client or customer's logo. These are all the people, sales team, CS team, obviously a lot of people here, decision makers, etc. So we call these workspaces. Again, shocker, centralized, clearly, right? Integrated with your CRMs, easy breezy, automated communications, always here, templates and journey books, everything automated, very, very clean and simple on how to execute all this. This is a very simple use case that I'm doing here, But this is like a sales discovery. So for all the salespeople, this is obviously a high level mutual plan, which takes people through a proven process for data collection, all sorts of things. Again, all that accountability for a certain thing. And of course, all your marketing materials and anything else like that, your demo videos, everything within the ecosystem here. But centralized, repeatable, visible, data collection, guided experiences. We have a lot of things built into the technology. What's new for you, taking people to exactly what they need to see based on roles and other things, but ultimately brings it to life in one centralized environment. And all the intelligence of what's going on here is, of course, back into your CRM. And then for your onboarders in the room, the onboarding, just classic use cases in onboarding within our ecosystem. Onboarding is clearly typically usually a more complicated experience. Sales, it's kind of pretty well defined if you know your personas and your stakeholders, and you can attack with pretty standardized deployments. Obviously, for the onboarders in the room, they're like, yeah, Joe, you're right. Onboarding's much harder. It is. And there's typically a lot more subtasking and things, ownership going out and collaborating on things and doing all sorts of stuff. This is just a use case of that. Obviously, an onboarding mutual plan, there's internal tasking, external tasking, all sorts of stuff for the data collection and processes there. We do a lot of clients also that are doing like onboarding and then installs at multi-facilities or whatever. But ultimately, the entire experience, of course, all your marketing materials, all that stuff, of course, is delivered through these ecosystems also. But what these are repeatable experiences to knock down those silos, get the people from those silos engaged quickly on the part that they need to be involved with, and then get them out. You're done with them. You don't need to drag them through the whole experience. You're just engaging them on mission critical pieces of that experience, and then you're on your way. All right. So I appreciate everybody's time. Building blocks, kind of going backwards again, is obviously define the roles and the personas in your silos. Then understand, if you can, what they want. The easiest way to do that is just look back. If you're in sales, look back on your last 25 deals and you'll get 80% there of what each one of those personas want, maybe even higher, right? Easy way to do that. Same thing from the OBs on the call, onboarders. So the OBs basically look at obviously your last 10 onboardings. You'll start to figure out by persona type and role what those needs are. And then you have kind of then the basic framework of how to attack these silos now moving forward and early in the process. And then obviously encouraging to have a centralized ecosystem and a way to visualize this, a way to measure it, all the analytics on it, all the communication on it, obviously to move everything aggressively in the direction of your desired end goal, which in your case would be onboarding, right? And somewhere in the in between is that handoff. I'm not going to showcase that today, but ultimately, same things happen in the handoff ecosystem. So I appreciate everybody's time. I always offer it up, like I said at the beginning. If you're in a place where you're like, I don't understand, Joe, how that might work for our group, or we're really complex, could I bounce some ideas off of you? Always in my follow-up email. I call them one-to-one sessions. It will not be a demo. It will just be help me understand your ecosystem, and then I can share with you, without telling you the clients' names, how groups are doing this very successfully, and it might give you some more ideas to make your group more successful. So again, appreciate the time, appreciate your efforts in improving your company and your processes to win more. And please check out, we do about a webinar a week, sometimes more, depending on topics and stuff. But again, on behalf of Proteus and myself, Joey Connect, thanks for your time here. So thanks everybody, and have a great rest of your hump day.